Welcome to HWM Aston Martin. Now behind me is the Aston Martin Vanquish. It is the flagship car in our range, and one of the key defining features of the Vanquish is its carbon fibre bodywork. The shapes that we can make out of the carbon fibre make it not only one of the most gorgeous cars we make, but also one of the most assertive. But what happens when you peel away that gorgeous bodywork and you're left with a car underneath? Well, we're quite lucky that we can actually show you today. So, behind me is our rolling chassis for the Aston Martin Vanquish. And essentially what we have up front is our big V12 engine mated to the gearbox, the axles, and it's essentially a naked Vanquish. Missing from this whole element would be the aluminium tub made of aluminium extrusions, and they're bonded together by resin, which is well known within the build process. But that, married to this, is essentially the underpinnings of that car. So, starting at the engine, this is the 6-litre V12 which we've ran with since DB7 Vantage, but it's been fettled and enhanced and modified every year to become a very, very modern power plant. It's unique in character that it's naturally aspirated and that it's big and it's gutsy, and it now produces 567 brake horsepower. The stats that therefore come with that are a 0 to 60 time of 3.7 seconds, and its top speed is 203 miles an hour. The engine's magnificent, and it's managed by Bosch Engine Management. Now actually, that's not just one ECU managing the whole thing, there are actually two, one on either side. And the reason for that is that it needs two processors to also manage the gearbox, which is the latest 8-speed unit from ZF. Now the gearbox is hung out over the rear. Now, the reason Aston Martin do this is essentially to give the car perfect 50-50 weight distribution. And it's mated to the engine via a carbon fibre prop shaft. Now, the benefits of a carbon fibre prop shaft are that there's lower inertia when it spins, and essentially very little of the engine's power is lost then when it goes to the rear wheels. Now, that prop shaft itself is mounted within an aluminium torque tube. Now this, it's not quite as nicely finished when you see one in a proper car, but is incredibly light, and I could literally pick it up with one hand. Moving to the back of the vehicle, we have the gearbox. Now the gearbox is actually as heavy as the engine. Now these units come from ZF in Germany, and the reason we use them is that they are essentially the industry best gearbox. Now, it's an 8-speed, full automatic, mated to a torque converter, which we see here. Now, the torque converter essentially smooths out all the shifts, and it works like any other automatic gearbox in a Mercedes or any kind of luxury car to create a very relaxing GT car drive. The difference with this gearbox is that it's almost as good as some of the twin clutch systems, and it's completely engaging should you then decide to start using the pedals and shift through the gears yourselves with the Touchtronic system. Now, with the gearbox, we then have it mated to, in this instance, the rear suspension setup. Now, the suspension all round on a Vanquish is from Bilstein. Now, the reason we use Bilstein for the dampers is that, once again, they are the industry best. And it's with everything in an Aston Martin, we go for best of breed components. So whether it be the gearboxes from ZF, the dampers from Bilstein, the brakes which are from Brembo, or even the leathers that come from Bridge of Weir, we choose all these suppliers because they can provide us with the absolute pinnacle of components. Now the dampers themselves are 3-stage adaptive dampers. Now when I say they're adaptive, essentially they always work with the brain of the car. The brain of the car knows everything that you're doing as a driver, and it can also read the road surface. So for example, if you're putting in steering input, the brain of the car is reading this, and basically it's telling the dampers to counteract as appropriate. Should you put a load of braking force on, the dampers will counteract as appropriate to stop the car from pitching uncontrollably under braking. And the whole thing is very, very clever. Now when we say it's always adaptive, it is always on. And when we say 3-stage, what we essentially mean is there's an element of control from you as a driver to how those dampers work. And essentially, if you imagine a whole damper working and being adaptive and adapting for your driving style and also the road use, basically when you flip from normal mode into sport, you're setting the base of that damper at 50% stiffer. If you go into track mode, it sets it at 75% stiffer and essentially gives that damper less work to do when you're driving dynamically. What it will do in track mode, incidentally, is should you go over a curb, and by that we don't mean the ones that the Ocado vans park on, the red and white ones on a racetrack, it will give full slip and will just relax so that you don't cause any damage to the car. So very clever damper setup as well. As we said earlier, behind these alloy wheels we have carbon ceramic brakes from Brembo. Carbon ceramic brake technology, obviously born out of the track. You shouldn't ever have to replace the discs, to be fair, through normal wear and tear, and they don't fade under prolonged heavy use. Also, a nice little benefit of them is that you get very little brake dust off a carbon ceramic brake disc. And then we come to the back, and we get to the exhaust system on Vanquish. Now, this is the emotive point for many an owner. It's the noise the Aston Martin makes, and I think Aston Martin can really be credited for making some of the best sounding cars in the market. But in a Vanquish it's quite easy. We stole the exhaust box out of the 177 hypercar and fitted it to our flagship Super GT. And it makes a phenomenal noise. It's also quite adaptive as well, so if you come close, you can come and have a look at the exhaust system here. On either side you'll see them. These are the exhaust bypass valves, and this is the difference between being quiet mode and noisy. And what happens typically is that exhaust gas will come through here, and if it's below 5,000 revs, for example, will then feed into there, come round and escape out of the exhaust. Now if the revs are above 5, or should you be in the sport mode, essentially this bypass valve opens and all the exhaust gases go straight through. The effect almost like a straight through exhaust pipe, and that's what makes it all super noisy. And that's it. That's the Vanquish under the skin. And maybe now we all have an appreciation of why it's one of the best sports GT cars in the world.